Well, I want to welcome everybody here today. This is Joe Markiewicz with today's edition of our Liberty Dispatch, and I have the honor of having a good friend join us here today. His name is Rick Green, and not only do I know Rick, I'm really getting to know his family well. I want to have Rick introduce himself. He's based out of Texas. I like to call him, and I think many people call him, America's Constitution coach. He is an expert on our founding charters, our American history. He loves this country. He's a patriot, and I'm just privileged to have him with us today. We're going to have a good little dialogue today. I'm going to turn it over to you, Rick, just to introduce yourself a little bit,
Sure.
speak to our audience, and thank you for joining us.
Man, my pleasure, Joe. Always good to be with a fellow patriot. I love what you do as well, and equipping people to understand freedom and to wear freedom. I like that. We need to be advertising and marketing freedom to people so they understand the value of it. People call me America's Constitution coach because our Constitution class is the most popular one in the country, and we make it fun and exciting. So it's not a typical lecture teacher situation. It is more like coaching. It's fun and empowers people and engages them and inspires them to get involved in making a difference and just being good citizens. I got there just by studying myself. I'm not a guru of any kind. I got to learn at the feet of some greats like David Barton and Ed Meese and all of these others that really are, I think, some of the greatest constitutional minds and historical minds that America's had for the last few decades. And so I've had the privilege of learning from them and just taking what I learned from them and putting it out there in a fun, entertaining way. We're blessed to have hundreds of thousands of people go through our Constitution classes and then turn around and do that locally, become a force multiplier. I think you've used that phrase before as well. It's so important for people to realize this isn't just something to sit back and be a spectator with. It's something to participate in. Being a citizen is a wonderful privilege. To be a citizen in a free country where you get to control your government rather than your government control you, man. What an exciting place to be.
And in fact, Rick, you have served in politics in your over the last several years. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I got to serve as a Texas legislator. I was a state rep here in Texas for 2 terms. Back in my younger days, I was pretty young when I got elected, 26 when I ran for the legislature, ran against a powerful incumbent. But people of my area said, hey, it's time for a change. Let's get a conservative in there. And so served 2 terms. And then after that, started traveling around the country, equipping others to do the same and just to be good citizens. Not everybody's got to run for office. In fact, we don't want everybody to run for office, but everybody has a role to play in preserving freedom.
I'm going to trigger off of that and piggyback off of that because myself, I'm a self-employed. I'm a business owner, somebody that over the years grew in an appreciation for our liberties and our freedoms because, well, there's just something different about when you own something.
Yeah.
When you are extremely grateful and appreciative of the fact that you can provide for your family through a business of your own, you start learning about these things. You start searching and digging deep about our not only our liberties, but the blessing of freedom and how important free enterprise and capitalism is to our economy and our American way of life. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but those of you that are watching us, a little bit about me. From time to time, I'll comment on current issues. I try to stay away from politics per se, although everything comes back to politics. But I try to stay away from it. And my love and my passion is to educate people on American exceptionalism and why America is different, why they're still coming from around the world to America.
Right.
I love to teach and to dialogue about what it means to be an American and the blessings of that liberty and how important it is to take what we've learned and transfer it on to the next generation. It was Ronald Reagan that said it very well, that every generation is, well, we're all one generation away from extinction in terms of our freedom and liberty. We're required to pass it on. We need to pass it on. These principles of liberty and freedom don't pass through the bloodstream. So I take it upon myself to do my part. And as for my generation, they're going to hear my voice. They're going to hear my voice in terms of the way I conduct myself in the marketplace, but also in platforms like this. And I get the privilege of really turning Rick loose a little bit. Rick, we're in election season, and this doesn't just apply because we're in election season, but because we're in a presidential race right now. It seems like all of media is focused on the candidates. I wish they would talk more about the issues.
Yeah.
And it is just so important, I think, for you and I to dialogue, and you do very well with this. So I'm just going to turn you loose about what I think when somebody walks into the ballot booth and they have that ballot in front of them, what should be their influence as an American? I believe they should be educated. I like to call it the 3 Ps. There's person, policy, and platform.
Yeah.
All of these matter, but there's one that is not as important as the others. And having said that, I want you to talk to everybody watching this a little bit, your perspective as we go into the ballot box. This is election season, but also beyond the election season, there is always going to be another election. Rick, give us your insight on that.
Well, I appreciate even that last part that you said, Joe, because, sometimes we get so caught up, especially in presidential elections, and we think, November 3rd, that's what it's all about. And then after that, it's all over and we don't have to worry about anything. And what you just said is so important that, yeah, big election coming up, most important one of my life for sure. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's just true. But man, it's not over November 3rd. Citizenship is something that you have a duty to be a part of till you're 6 feet under. I mean, you're never done as long as you're walking this earth and you have an ability to influence your leadership in your state, your community, your country. You've got a duty and responsibility to do that. So I was imagining that as you were saying it, walking into that voting booth, that is a sacred duty. I mean, you're literally choosing when you go into that voting booth, you're taking an action that is going to impact your grandchildren. Not just you, not just your kids, not just even your grandkids, your great grandkids. It's going to influence the coming generations. And so take it serious. And that's why I like what you said. Become educated about it. Doesn't mean you have to know everything about every issue. Doesn't even mean you'll know who all of the candidates are. I take a candidate guide into the voting booth myself, a voter guide where, people that I trust that have gone in and researched a lot of these folks that I don't know much about. Most people will know something about president or governor, or maybe U.S. Senate. But once you get further and further down the ballot, it's hard to do the research on those folks. So I always encourage people. There's some great resources out there. iVoterGuide.com is one of the ones I like to use. And they're in most states. I think every state now, maybe. But anyway, when you get in there, I think you're right. I think you have to look past the person or the personality. And this is just practical. I can tell you as a former legislator, when you elect someone, yeah, personality has an impact on whether we like or don't like that person. But at the end of the day, it's what they do when they push the button on the House floor. If they're a state legislator, let's say, it's which button they push that's really going to matter. The policy that they're voting for that's going to impact your backyard, impact your business, impact your child's education, your finances, all of those things. That's what really counts. And I got to be honest. I mean, there's people that I've worked with in the legislature or in Congress that I don't like, right? I mean, I want to leave the room as quick as possible. Sometimes I feel like I need to go take a shower after I've been in the room with them, right? I mean, there's just people like that out there. But yet, if on a particular issue, they were with me and helping me to bring good policy to my community or my state or my nation, I was willing to work with them. That's how this system works. And sometimes when you're dealing with a position like governor or president, where they're going to impact so many things, you're voting for so much more than one person's personality. On the gubernatorial level, at your state level, when you vote for governor, they're gonna appoint hundreds of people, from judges whenever there's a resignation to all of those cabinet positions. There's just so many things that they're going to do. With President Joe, man, we're talking about 4,000 appointments. So somebody's personality is such a minor issue when you're really voting for a package of people and policies and platforms. As you said, I think that's a great way to look at it. You got a person, you got a policies that they're going to bring in, and a platform that they support. I'm going to remember that. I'm going to steal that from you, brother. But that is a great way to think about it when you go in there. And I would say for president, you're literally talking about not just judges, not just cabinet secretaries, undersecretaries, regulations, policies that people will never hear about, things that happen behind the scenes, negotiations for. I remember seeing interviews a few weeks ago of all the people that had been kidnapped in other countries that President Trump had brought home over the last couple of years, and lives that have been saved in that way. I didn't know any of that had happened, right? I mean, we don't hear about a lot of the things that a president does or doesn't do. And so you're really, and maybe even another P for you, you're really voting for a philosophy. You're voting for a philosophy of government. Is this person going to lean towards the individual having more freedom, or some government bureaucrat controlling their life? And you can usually tell that from a person's background, what they've supported in the past, what their instincts will probably be going forward. You know, our current president's a little bit of an anomaly. I didn't have a voting record to go by in 2016 to compare him to his opponents. But I did know as a business guy that he would lean against government micromanaging businesses. So I knew that was a good indication. And that sometimes there's other indications that you can go off of. But I think you nailed it, man. I think we have to think about the package of people, policies, philosophy, platform, all of that. When you go in and you're going to the ballot box and you choose that presidential candidate or U.S. Senate candidate, you're choosing a team. You really are. And so you've got to think about that. And you've got to look at what that team is for or against. And sometimes that team, that does mean party, right? That does mean Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or whatever else is out there. You're choosing, what is that platform? What does that team stand for? Are they for micromanaging businesses, or are they for letting the individual decide? Are they for protecting life and protecting having equality in our country so that we treat each other the same, regardless of color of the skin? The laws treat each other the same. What are they for? What do they stand for? And you can find that out. I mean, that's what these voter guides do. You can follow blogs like Joe's or mine, and you'll be able to see that. We watch this stuff, so we might be addicted. I don't know, Joe. We probably read too much of this stuff, but that's good for other people because we digest a lot of it and then try to put it out there, like you're saying in these dispatches. I like the way you put it. I'm going to be sharing that with people. The 3 Ps. That's good.
I think I get concerned, really concerned, because I challenge people that I interact with, people that I do business with, people that are in my church, etc. Even in my family.
Yeah.
I challenge them and I say, look, you don't need to tell me who you're voting for, but by your words, I can tell you who you're probably not going to vote for because you don't like them.
Mm.
And Rick, there is never going to be a perfect candidate.
That's right.
In fact, I've heard you say it this way, that unless Jesus is on the ballot, you'll always be voting for the lesser of two evils.
That's right. That's right, man. I just said that Sunday morning at a church, actually. Because I hear the same thing you're talking about when people tell me, I mean, look, let's just talk about the elephant in the room, right? People tell me I'm not going to vote for him because of his tweets. And I said to this church from the pulpit, I said, listen, folks, when you have a war of worldviews happening in our country right now, I mean, our cities are burning. I mean, this is serious. And you have a philosophy out there that says it is okay to take life. It's okay to kill a baby up to 9 months and even after it's born, right? And then you have someone that tweets something that offends you. I mean, grow up, right? It's time to say, look, it's not so. Winston Churchill would have scared these snowflakes to death. Churchill was rude, crude, and socially unacceptable, and he saved England, right? He helped us save the world. We have got to start looking past these little personality quirks and things that we don't like and say, who's going to get the job done? Who's going to actually push forward the things that are going to save our nation? I mean, there are people that want to destroy our nation and remake it completely into a socialist, Marxist world that has never worked in history. And we've got to stop them, man. It's for our children and grandchildren. I kind of like the fact that we have some scrappers out there right now. I'm supporting this gal in Texas. It's probably irrelevant to most of your viewers. Maybe some of them that are in Texas, but I'm supporting this gal for state senate right now. Some of my friends say, she's got no experience, or, she's a kind of rock singer. She goes out and sings at these clubs. She's a hairstylist and all this kind of stuff. Joe, this is a lady that had the boot of government on her neck. They jailed her in Dallas for opening her business. And when she stood up in court and she said, my employees' families were starving. They needed to feed their families. And I had to open my business, and I was willing to do that, and I was willing to pay the price for it. I said, I'll vote for that lady for any office, because she comes in with a gut instinct of saying, we've got to protect freedom. She's not, smooth about it. She's not articulate about it necessarily in some cases, but she's a patriot. And that's what our founders were like. They were farmers, man. They were people, merchants and farmers coming in. They weren't smooth talking. They were people that understood freedom and were willing to stand for it. And we need more of that.
I agree. You mentioned Winston Churchill. I believe it was him that spoke about socialism, and he said bluntly, boldly, that it's the equal sharing of misery. That's it.
Is.
And I agree with you that we don't need professional politicians just having a permanent residence up in Washington, D.C., or in our state government. I believe that President Trump, one of the reasons why he won back in 2016, because he said he was going to drain the swamp.
That's right.
And man, I liked that language.
I do too.
And I know that he's got baggage. Who doesn't? You got baggage. I got baggage. Thank God for Jesus, my Lord and Savior. And I can boldly say that that even though I'm not perfect, I'm forgiven.
Thank God that he uses broken people and flawed people, and
Yeah.
I mean, if he didn't, we'd all be in trouble, right? I mean, we would have none of the disciples would have been on the list. I mean, thank the good Lord.
We need to drain the swamp, and I know one of the reasons why our president Donald Trump has received so much pushback and so much resistance ever since, even before he stepped in office, is because I think he's taken on this monster that lives in the swamp. But we can go down that path.
Well, hey, Joe, I do want to say one thing about what you said, not wanting politicians, because there's a real simple test. A politician is focused only on the next election. They just want that permanent residence, like you're saying. A patriot is thinking about the next generation. They're thinking about the grandkids. They're thinking about how it's going to affect the next generation. And that's the way Trump's approached this whole thing. It's been like, I don't care. Sure, if I can get 2 terms to do this, great. But it's not about reelection. It's about doing the right thing in the moment and doing what's best for our country and what's best for the next generation. And we don't have enough people like that, but we're getting more and more of them.
And I agree with you. Last thing I want to, before we move on, I want to talk about that platform.
Yeah.
I know what's important to me. I'm a citizen. I know it's important to me as a believer, as a business owner, as someone who loves this country, who believes in self-determination. I believe that our heritage matters. I believe that our founding fathers they were not villains, but they're heroes. I believe that I believe what Abraham Lincoln spoke about. I believe what Ronald Reagan spoke about is that if we lose freedom here, there's no place else in the world for anyone. I mean, all hope is lost. I have certain beliefs and values and principles that I would like to see promoted by my elected leaders. And so while I may look at 2 or 3, depending on the ballot, could be local, could be state, it could be federal. I look at that ballot, and the last consideration I have is whether I like them.
That's right.
In North Carolina, Rick, there's a Senate election, very important. Every seat matters, you know that. And there's a Democrat that is running, Cal Cunningham, that is running against Tom Tillis. I'm not a big fan of Tom Tillis myself.
Yeah.
But what you see constantly on all the commercials is this wholesome military guy who's a moderate, who will work across the aisle. That's what you're hearing about the Democrat over here. He's also got some serious fidelity problems. Seems like nobody really cares about that. But the point is, while he's being portrayed as a moderate, just average American military, good family, pictures of him and his wife and his kids, and will work across the aisle. I personally don't trust him because I know, and this is about the platform, I know what the platform is of Chuck Schumer's party.
That's right.
He's the head of that right now, the minority leader. And I'm pretty convinced, and he has now never answered it whenever he's been challenged, whether he will just toe the party line or he will be more independent and actually do what he says just to get elected. I get concerned about that. I see that in politicians. So what I do is I look at the platform.
That's good.
What does the platform stand for? Because most likely somebody elected to that party is going to follow that platform. Any other comments on that?
Yeah, because, and you're thinking exactly right, because you're not only voting for U.S. Senator there, you're voting for Senate Majority Leader, which really controls what goes through the Senate. So even if somebody's a freshman senator and they have very little power, they're going to help choose who that Senate Majority Leader is, and those handful of people are going to determine which judges get approved, whether or not the court gets packed, all of those things going forward. So it's a huge race in North Carolina right now because it's going to be one of those critical races to determine control of the Senate. Same thing when you vote for Congress. You're not just voting for a House member that you like or dislike. You're voting for who's going to be Speaker of the House. Which party is going to control the House determines which kind of legislation comes through. And the worldviews could not be more diametrically opposed right now. One of them has adopted this whole critical race theory, Marxist idea of dividing us based on race, based on money, based on gender, whatever they can do. They say America is irretrievable. It has to be destroyed. That's the new Democrat Party line. I mean, it's unbelievable that a party has adopted this, whereas the other side is saying what President Trump has said with his 1776 commission, what you started off with today, that America is exceptional, that it's the exception to the rule, that it's extraordinary, that our story's not perfect. Our founders were flawed just like us, sinners just like us, made mistakes just like us, but somehow, some way, God used them to put in place the greatest formula for freedom the world's ever known. And so now we have one party trying to tear apart that formula and the other party trying to defend it. And so in many ways, America's on trial right now as to what our future will be and even what our past was, literally defining what our past was. So it could not be more different. You nailed it, man. We're voting for a platform right now, and it's not just president, it's all the way down.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. I think really what's also on the ballot, you touched upon it, is especially in the Senate. I mean, who's going to hold power? Because court packing, just basically turning over a century and a half of the way we do things at the judicial branch, removing and getting rid of the Electoral College. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about bringing in new states, Puerto Rico, District of Columbia, maybe even more, for one purpose, not because it's good for America, but because you can pretty much have a supermajority because what you're going to get with the senators there. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about our border security and sovereignty. A lot of these things. So I know we've talked an awful lot about platform and policy and people and elections. It's so important, and it does go beyond just what happens on November 3rd, which is probably a great segue. And I think this will be the other topic we'll be able to talk about today, and that will be it. I get concerned, Rick, that our children and eventually each generation will move further and further away from really understanding civics, understanding our country's founding, the blessings of liberty. I believe that there's a whole bunch of revisionist history going on right now, and it's for a purpose. That if you asked, what did maybe this, but 50-60% of millennials do not really believe that America is good,
right,
exceptional. and they have no idea about our founding fathers other than George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. We're slave owners, and Ben Franklin did this, and Thomas Jefferson's a deist. And they're being told, according to an agenda, a message that is so contrary to the way you and I grew up. And I don't know if you remember this, Steve. I just thought about this. Did you watch Schoolhouse Rock when you grew up? Remember
Absolutely.
that? It's so
How a bill
silly back
becomes a
then, but
law.
I look back on it every Saturday morning with all the cartoons. But every Saturday morning, I would see Schoolhouse Rock, and I learned about the three branches of government. I learned about how a bill comes into a law.
I'm just a bill.
Yes, it was so good. I want to talk to you about this because I know you're passionate about this. The very reason there's a Patriot Academy there, that this is important to you. I want you to talk about why you do what you do, and this aspect of the American experience and history and education. Go ahead.
Yeah, man, I would attribute both the burning of our cities right now, the rioting in the streets, and the unconstitutional, unprecedented, out of control COVID crackdowns of governors acting as dictators for the last 7 months with no legislative input, with no separation of powers or checks and balances. I would attribute both of those problems. They seem unrelated, but I would attribute both of them to the real pandemic, which is the underlying problem that's been festering for 50 years that you just put your finger on. It's civic ignorance. We have not taught basic civics of what makes a society work well and what will destroy a society. And by not teaching that, our people have become very susceptible to pithy statements and just slogans that are empty and that are based on total lies. And when you go to the Declaration, you don't get to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness without starting with, we hold these truths. Truth matters. And when you build everything on lies, you become susceptible to absolute tyranny. And that's what's happening with our youth right now. You nailed it. I mean, they don't know. We have 74% of Americans that cannot name the three branches of government, Joe. So, I mean, all you need is Schoolhouse Rocks to learn that, right? But we're not even teaching that. And in fact, when we do our Constitution classes, we play a video, one of the old Schoolhouse Rocks videos. We play it back to back with a Saturday Night Live skit where instead of becoming a bill, it's all about executive orders and just making law on your own. It was back during Obama doing these unconstitutional executive orders, which, side note, executive orders can be constitutional or unconstitutional. It depends on if they're executing a law passed by our elected members of Congress or they're making up law on their own. But anyway, we just don't teach that kind of stuff anymore. And so what's happened is there's been a concentrated effort to use the education system to pour this Marxist philosophy into our kids. And we've let it happen. We've stood by and watched it happen. Our legislators have poured billions of dollars into these universities that are undermining the very essence of what it means to be an American. And so these kids that are rioting in the streets right now, they think they're part of a righteous cause. I mean, there's some thugs, no doubt, but a lot of these kids that are out there right now, they really believe they're doing the right thing. They believe they're part of a revolution to create a better America. They're tearing down statues of what they think are evil things. They have been absolutely lied to. They bought it hook, line, and sinker. I think one of the most important things President Trump has done is this executive order on saying no more critical race theory allowed in any federal agency to be taught. And now some state legislatures are considering doing the same thing. That will defund the left. It'll defund this idea that America is bad and must be destroyed, and instead go back to teaching true history. And that's what we do at Patriot Academy, man. Our Constitution classes are being taught all over the country now. And all it is just basic civics. We're basically doing what the schools used to do, but we're doing it in a fun way, and we're making it where everybody can be a part of it. We teach young people in state capitals. So we actually take over state capitals for about a week at a time. And on the House floor, you'll see these young leaders, 16 to 25. We do a military Patriot Academy where they take over the Senate, military vets of all age. and we teach them those civics, and we let them experience what a constitutional republic is really all about. Not so they'll all go run for office, but so they'll go home and go, okay, now I get it. I understand how our system's supposed to work. I understand what I'm voting for, that package, that system or group of policies that I'm voting for. So, man, we love what we do. PatriotAcademy.com if people want to learn more. I just encourage people to get involved, man. Start becoming students of freedom. The best way to honor those who came before us and paid the price for our freedom is to have what Lincoln called in his Gettysburg Address an increased devotion to the cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That cause is what you and I have been talking about this whole time. It's that American exceptionalism. It's this value system. America is a force for good. In fact, it's been the greatest national force for good the world has ever known. And our people need to know that. We're combating an evil worldview out there. It's Marxism to a T. It's right out of Karl Marx. I mean, if you go read Marx from the 1850s and 60s, and you read Naked Communist from Cleon Skousen in the 1950s, where he breaks it down, we're watching it happen in our nation right now. I mean, those things are coming to life. They can be defeated, but we have to hit them head on. That's why it's good to have a scrapper in the White House that's willing to do what he's done. I mean, I've known a lot of good people in politics and in the Republican Party that have not been willing to take on that fight. It's been like the third rail, kind of like Social Security always was. They haven't been willing to take this on, and they've allowed 2 generations of Americans to be poisoned with this. The good news and the shocking news, Joe, is that even with all of that happening for the last 50 years, half the country still gets it. We should have lost everybody, right? I mean, they've controlled all these institutions for so long. We should be losing all the way around. But the good news is truth shines through, and just a few people standing up and speaking that truth can overcome all of this negativity and this evil that's happened for the last few decades.
I'm reminded in the Book of Deuteronomy, which Moses pretty much wrote the whole book, with the exception right at the end because he was dead. Somebody had to document his death. But Moses wrote the whole book of Deuteronomy. And by the time, at the end of the 40 years that they were wandering in the desert, a good number of the Israelites who came out of Egypt, the oppression of Egypt, of Pharaoh, the crossing of the Red Sea, the protection, the splitting of the Red Sea, and the law being brought down in tablets from the mountain, the majority of the Israelites by that time, at the end of the 40 years of wandering in the desert, were not alive to see all this. Moses knew that it must be documented. Joshua and Caleb, the stories of Joshua and Caleb entering into the promised land, and throughout the generations of Israelites, it was so important to the Jewish tradition that their history, their very identity was passed down from one generation to the next. I grew up in a world where that socialism, communism, Marxism, you got to be kidding me. That's Russia. I was afraid. I grew up in Rochester, New York, Rick, and there was some pretty big industry there. And my dad, he wouldn't talk about some of the things he was working on, but Rochester was expected. I mean, if in a nuclear attack, Russia would want to take out this area, Rochester, for a lot of reasons. A lot of the secret stuff that Kodak was doing for their spy satellites, et cetera. Incredible, very interesting to me. And so all I saw was the Red Square. All I saw was military vehicles going through the center of Moscow and celebrating the might of Brezhnev. That's who it was. The might of Russia, and the greatness of communism. Right past images of Stalin and Karl Marx. And then the same thing with Mao Zedong. That's a name that you might remember. In China, the exact same thing. And it's crazy today that there is such a desensitizing to people about socialism, about Marxism, about communism. that our history, especially through World War II, we defeated tyranny and fascism and saved the world from a very dark place.
That's right.
And it was because of freedom. And I get really concerned about this, and I feel a responsibility to continue to teach and teach, like you are, the principles of liberty and why we are different than the rest of the world and why this is worth fighting for. What's your thoughts on all this?
Well, and even more than desensitizing to socialism, it literally embracing it and teaching it as this utopian society that's going to work. I got a good friend that last night on our panel, we've got the largest Constitution class in history happening right now on Monday nights. We've got 11,000 people dialing in, and one of the other guys on the panel, he said, Rick, I don't get it. He said, if every time you got in a car, it crashed every time. No matter what. Every time you got in it, there was a wreck. It didn't work. It crashed. Sooner or later, you'd probably say, nah, I don't think I want to get in that car. It's not going to work. Socialism and communism have failed every single time they've ever been tried. 100 million people murdered in just the last 100 years because of socialism and communism. And yet we've got all these professors across America teaching this stuff to our kids and convincing them we just haven't driven that car right yet. We just got to get in that car one more time, even though every time it's failed. It's unbelievable that we fall for this stuff. I guess in some ways, maybe it's just our human nature. I don't know, because you look at the children of Israel and the stupid things they did and you go, well, okay, we're acting like them. Every time I read those stories, like you're talking about, they see all these miracles and then they turn around and do the golden calf right at, and you're going, how would you, oh, wait a minute. We do the same thing. We're just as bad as them. Right. So some of it's just human nature. And I think we got to do, I'm so glad you told that story, because I think we got to do what Moses did in Deuteronomy. And throughout the Bible, you just hear the history is retaught over and over and over again. And sometimes it's not popular, Joe. I mean, think about it. That's why they stoned Stephen, because he's standing up saying, here's who we are as a people. Here's the truth about who we are as a people. I think it's right now we have a Josiah moment, though, where the scrolls have been brought out. He's reading the history and he's going, whoa, that's what we're about. We're going to have a revolution in our country in a good way and come back to these principles. I think people are doing that in America. They're going, man, what I'm seeing in the streets, I don't like. What's happening to our nation, I don't like. I think I'll actually ask some questions. And I know it's happening to you as well. People that have never talked to you about politics or government or the Constitution or federalism or the state role, federal, they're asking those questions. So I do think there's an awakening in our country right now that's hopefully enough. I do believe it's enough to push back this move towards socialism, this utopian idea that has never, ever, ever worked, and come back to the principles that have worked every time. As Bob McEwen says, the only problem with these freedom principles is they only work every time they're tried. That's the good news. When we actually come back to these principles, they work. They produce all the things we want: prosperity and freedom, religious liberty, you name it. We've just got to bring those principles back. And that's our job as citizens.
I love what you do. I wish people would just be brave enough to be able to have public discourse where it doesn't end up in name calling, insults, and all. Those are always conversation enders. I believe that this kind of wholesome dialogue that should happen is helpful. That's what democracy is. That's what we have. And
Joe, that's a communist tactic, by the way. I mean, just to point that out, that is straight out of Karl Marx. I mean, he wrote about it. You have to shout down your enemy. You have to insult them. You have to prevent them from influencing the debate or influencing the culture. That's why they do that. They don't, I mean, discourse, a liberal will sit down and have conversations with you and you can discuss things because they understand a little bit about classical liberalism. A leftist that's bought into this, Saul Alinsky kind of Marx, they're going to shout you down, or they're going to call you every name in the book. So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that's again, Marxism coming out. And anytime we can sit down with somebody that disagrees and have a real conversation, you're both going to be better off. I mean, we should seek those kind of conversations out.
Yeah. Iron sharpens iron.
Amen.
Well, that's a great way to wrap up today. We're going to do this again, Rick.
I'd love to.
You're a hero in my eyes. You're willing to be able to make these tough arguments in tough crowds. I love the fact that you and I are connected with our love for this country, and we want to do something about it. I love your energy and your passion. I look forward to doing this again, Rick.
I do as well, Joe. Thanks for what you do, man. God bless you. I can't wait till the next time.
All right. See you soon.